I used to believe that if I just kept giving, if I kept showing up, if I stayed reliable, even when everyone else wasn't, then one day my family would see me differently. They would stop treating me like the spare wheel or the emergency fund and finally treat me like someone who belonged. That hope was stubborn, almost childish, but it's what kept me going. And it's what made me pour 2 years of savings into an idea that was supposed to bring us closer, a family trip to Italy. I pictured it so vividly. The cobblestone streets of Florence, my mother's laughter echoing in open piazzas, my sister finally setting her phone down to actually look at the ruins of Rome, my father softening his shoulders under Tuscan skies. I imagined us eating together at long wooden tables where the food was simple and the wine endless, maybe even laughing about old fights that suddenly seemed too small to matter. I thought a trip could be medicine, a way to fix cracks that had been widening for years. So I planned everything: flights, hotels, day tours, a rental car for the coast. Every detail was organized into folders and apps, carefully cross-checked. I even gave them access to my travel account, thinking I was being generous, transparent. I wanted them to feel included. The cost came close to $30,000, and while I didn't expect to shoulder all of it forever, I figured they'd reimburse me bit by bit. That was always the unspoken agreement: I'd pay up front, they'd cover their share later. At least that's what I told myself. That's what. But if I'm honest, deep down, I already knew the truth. I was the bank. I was the one who made life easier for everyone else, who quietly solved problems so no one had to feel uncomfortable. I had become fluent in fixing things, even when the cost was mine alone. Still, some desperate part of me clung to the fantasy that this time would be different. The dinner was at Bayonne Quays, their favorite restaurant. Not because the food was extraordinary half the time they mispronounced what they ordered, but because it had the kind of polished atmosphere they liked to pretend we belonged in. White tablecloths, imported olive oil waitstaff who spoke softly, as if silence was luxury. I arrived right on time as usual. I wore something simple but decent because I wanted to believe that maybe this night wasn't another performance, maybe it was just family. Everyone else was already seated. My mom kissed my cheek like she hadn't ignored 3 of my calls last week. My sister barely lifted her gaze from her phone, tapping like I wasn't even there. My brother nodded at me with the stiff professionalism of a coworker. My dad gave me that tight smile he reserves for moments when he's about to say something cruel, but hasn't yet decided when to drop it. At first, things seemed almost normal. We shared bread-clinked glasses of wine. My mom complained about airport security, even though she wasn't flying for another day. My brother cracked a joke about his trainer that made me laugh despite myself. And for a second, just one, I felt the ghost of what I'd always wanted: a family moment without hidden daggers. But the shift came with the pasta. My mother set her fork down with deliberate weight, looked not at me, but at my sister, and said, "It's for those who actually contribute." The silence after was a void. My sister smirked, without even trying to hide it. My brother kept his eyes on his phone, but his shoulders betrayed the tension. My father dabbed his mouth with his napkin like he was brushing away a crumb. And then came my sister's line, rehearsed like a cue. "Just be happy, we told you all." They didn't look at me when they said it. They didn't need to. It was a performance staged weeks in advance, and I was the uninvited audience. I swallowed the pasta in my mouth, forced myself not to choke, and said the only thing that felt appropriate: "Thanks for the honesty." I meant it not as gratitude, but as acknowledgement. They'd finally said out loud what had always been implied. I wasn't family. I was a tool, a safety net, a convenient ATM they could mock when I wasn't in the room. The rest of the dinner blurred. I don't remember dessert, though I know I paid the bill, because I always did. No one offered to split it. They never did. I walked out into the night air and felt something inside me snap. Not loudly, not explosively, but with a quiet finality that chilled me more than any scream could. At home, I didn't pace or rage. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began canceling everything. One by one, I erased the trip they had so carefully excluded me from. Flights canceled, hotels, released car rental voided day tours withdrawn. The system refunded about 80%, leaving me $6,000 short, but it felt like a bargain. $6,000 to buy my freedom, $6,000 to erase their smug little plan. Then I revoked every linked device. My mother's tablet, my sister's phone, my dad's login. They'd all had access to my travel app. I removed them one by one, watching their names disappear from my account like smoke. Finally, I blocked their emails from my account entirely, a digital eviction they would feel the moment they tried to leach back in. I finished at 3 a.m. By 5:17 a.m., my brother texted, "We can't board, call the airline." By 6, I had 5 missed calls from my mom, 2 from my dad, 3 from my sister. At 8:10, my father left a voicemail with a single brutal line. "You're out of the apartment. I want you out by next week." I stood there in the quiet of the apartment I had paid them $1,000 a month to rent, less than market rate, yes, but at the cost of constant control. They dictated the thermostat, the furniture, the guest list. It wasn't a home, it was a leash, and now they were yanking it. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just started packing. Slowly, deliberately, almost ritualistically, I folded shirts and stacked books and taped boxes. Not because I was rushing, but because I wanted to remember every second. I wanted to remember what it felt like to finally be free. By 3 that afternoon, half the kitchen was packed. 3 bags of clothes were sorted, and I had found a listing for a furnished 1-bedroom across town. The landlord was moving to Canada and needed someone immediately. After a short video call and a Venmo transfer, the place was mine. 6 months, no cosigner, no approval required. Just me, my decision, my key. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The next morning, they came knocking. I knew it was them before I even opened the door. The rhythm of their knock was too familiar, sharp, impatient, the kind that always meant they weren't here to talk, they were here to control. I wiped the tape residue off my fingers from sealing a box and braced myself. When I opened the door, my mom stood there with a plastic container of Danish pastries, her smile stretched too wide, trembling around the edges. My dad lingered behind her, his hands jammed in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor like he was reading instructions no one else could see. And from inside my mom's oversized purse, my sister's voice leaked out of a phone on speaker tinny and sharp. "Just listen, okay?" They had clearly rehearsed this. My mom went first, saying they'd been hasty, that emotions had been running high, that we could move past this if I stopped acting irrational. My dad chimed in about forgiveness, about family unity, about not burning bridges. My sister, loud through the phone, accused me of being hostile, dramatic, overreacting to one mistake. That word drama was gasoline on dry wood. I looked at the boxes stacked behind me, at the taped-up cartons of dishes and books, and something inside me surged. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply began listing like an accountant reading a ledger no one wanted to see. The loan I took out for my dad's back surgery when insurance wouldn't cover it. The rent I paid twice for my sister because her roommate bailed. The canceled plans, the guilt trips, the hundreds of dollars funneled into groceries and utilities that were always family expenses. Every time I had bent, broken, sacrificed, while never once being thanked. "You don't get to call this drama," I said finally. "You don't get to play confused. You don't get to pretend this is about one dinner." My mom's mouth tightened. My dad cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a lecture, but I cut him off before he could begin. "I'm moving in 2 days. I don't need help. I don't need advice. And I will not be at Sunday dinner." Then I closed the door. Slowly, firmly. The pastries trembled in her hand. Packing became more than a chore. It became a ritual of release. I wrapped each glass like I was protecting my future, not my past. I folded every piece of clothing as if saying goodbye to the version of myself that believed staying silent was safer. The apartment echoed emptier each hour, but my chest felt lighter. 2 days later, I carried the last box down the stairs and slid it into the trunk of a rideshare. I didn't look back at the windows. If they were watching, if they were hoping for one final glance, they didn't get it. The new apartment was small and a little beat up, but it glowed with freedom. Sunlight poured through windows without permission slips. The faucet hissed like a snake, but it was my snake. The thrifted couch I found on Marketplace sagged a little, but it was mine. I slept badly that first night, half expecting some passive-aggressive text or a key rattling in the door. But instead, there was silence. And silence, I discovered, is a gift. The first week alone was disorienting. I kept bracing for criticism, for orders, for reminders that I wasn't enough. Instead, there was only my own voice, my own decisions. I bought a second-hand espresso machine, the kind my mom would have called unnecessary. Every hiss of steam felt like rebellion. I set up my desk by the window, and for the first time, I worked without someone hovering. I could breathe, eat, laugh, even cry without being observed. But silence doesn't last when people like my family are involved. The first email came 10 days after I moved. Subject line, "Please call us. It's urgent." From my mom. I deleted it. An hour later, my dad, "We need to talk. Please don't ignore us." I muted the thread. By the next morning, my brother emailed, "Hey, something happened. Please just call me." I didn't, but I couldn't help myself. I checked their socials. My sister's Instagram had gone dark. My brother's daily gym check-ins vanished. My mom's Facebook, usually flooded with cat memes, had been silent for days. It was the kind of silence that carried weight. Something had gone wrong. I found out through my cousin Derek. The Italy trip, the one I canceled, had cost them far more than they admitted. The airline had refused to refund certain taxes. The Rome hotel hit them with a hidden cancellation fee. The travel insurance was useless because no one bothered to file the claim correctly. In total, they lost nearly $8,000. And worse, my dad had put part of it on a credit card he was already behind on. His account froze. My sister's tuition reimbursement fell through. Their dream trip that never happened still managed to financially wreck them. That's when the calls turned from anger to begging. Voicemails stacked up, my dad's voice trembling, my mom sobbing, my sister furious and pleading in the same breath. I listened to each one, but never answered. Then my mom said something that should have cut me but didn't. "If you don't help us now, you're not our daughter anymore." The words echoed, but instead of hurting, they freed me. They thought they were cutting me out. They didn't realize I had already walked away. 2 months slipped by in a blur of quiet routines. For the first time in my adult life, I had mornings without panic and nights without dread. I grocery shopped on my own schedule, cooked what I wanted, left dishes in the sink if I felt like it. My work sharpened too. I noticed how much easier it was to focus, without constant demands dragging me down. For the first time, I started saving money into an account only I could touch. But silence in my family never meant peace. It meant plotting. It started with the car. My father's pride and joy, a gleaming vehicle he polished weekly like it was a crown. One afternoon, walking home from a cafe, I saw it parked on a side street. Only it wasn't him behind the wheel. A week later, my cousin sent me a screenshot. The car was listed for sale on Marketplace. Seeing it there stripped of its throne-like aura and reduced to a commodity for teenagers shook me more than I expected. Pride was their currency, and now even that was slipping. Then came the knock. It was late afternoon when I opened the door to find my brother. Hoodie pulled up, sunglasses on backpack slung low. He didn't wait for an invitation, just walked in like old habits die harder than trust. He sat on my couch, looked around my small apartment with the face of someone measuring disappointment, and finally said, "They need help." I leaned against the wall and let him talk. The savings were gone. The credit cards were frozen. My mom's hours at work had been cut, and my sister was under HR investigation at her company for expenses. He didn't elaborate. Finally, he dropped the bomb. The mortgage was 2 months behind the bank, sending warnings foreclosure looming. Then he reached into his backpack like he was about to reveal treasure. Instead, he pulled out a manila envelope. Inside, bank statements, a drafted repayment contract, bullet points, interest rates. A business proposal dressed as family. They wanted me to loan them $10,000. They even offered proof they were serious this time. I stared at the papers, then at him. Without a word, I fetched 2 glasses of water, set one in front of him, and sat down with mine. He filled the silence with excuses, how words at that dinner weren't meant the way they sounded, how my mom didn't mean it when she said I wasn't their daughter, how they'd been stressed, scared, desperate. I waited. When he was done, I said the smallest word I knew. No. He blinked, confused, like I had spoken in another language. He tried again. You don't understand. If you don't help them, this could get really bad. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. It already has. He left without arguing, mumbling that they'd figure something out. That night, as I sat with the silence, an email alert flashed. Fraud detection. Someone had tried to open a payday loan in my name using my old address for $3,500. It failed because months earlier, right after moving, I had frozen my credit on a hunch. The application matched every detail: name, birthday, social security. This wasn't a hacker. This was someone who already knew me. Someone I used to live with. I didn't confront them. There was no point. Instead, I filed a report, locked down my credit, even further set up fraud alerts with the bureaus, and added every layer of protection I could. That night, lying in bed, I realized something terrifyingly clear. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't even family. I was just a target. Weeks passed with eerie stillness. The calls stopped. The texts stopped. I let myself believe maybe they'd accepted it. I started to fill the silence with life again, cheap plants on the windowsill, neighbors who invited me to board game nights, laughter that didn't echo with guilt. Then the smear campaign began. It started on Facebook, a dramatic black square with white text. My mom's post read, "Some people pretend to be family until you need them. Some people pretend to love you until you're no longer useful. But that's okay. God sees everything." The comments flooded in. "So sorry, Marie. You don't deserve this. Some people forget who raised them." Aunts and uncles started messaging me. Cousins texted confused. My grandmother even called, voice trembling, asking why my mom was crying about me. I ignored most of it, but then Uncle Jeff called. Not with pity, not with judgment, just with a blunt question. What the hell happened? So, I told him everything. The Italy trip, the cancellation, the eviction, the years of financial rescues, the mortgage request, the attempted payday loan, every ugly detail I had buried. He listened silent. When I finished, he let out a low whistle and said only, "Jesus Christ, Julia." That same afternoon, he posted his own status. Public. Full name tagged. It's hard watching people rewrite history to protect themselves. Proud of my niece for finally setting boundaries. Maybe if more of us had done that sooner, things would have been different. And just like that, the tide shifted. The comments under my mom's post began disappearing. Then the post itself vanished. Private messages trickled in, apologies, confessions, even stories of manipulation they'd experienced too. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. I was just the first to push back this hard. Then came my dad's email.
No subject, no greeting, just one line. You've embarrassed this family enough. We're blocking you.
It was supposed to sound like power. Instead, it sounded like surrender. I thought that email from my dad was the end, a pathetic attempt to reclaim authority followed by silence. And for a few weeks it was. I worked, I slept. I let my apartment fill slowly with the kind of life that didn't need anyone's permission.
But my family doesn't know how to leave well enough alone.
3 days later, a new post appeared on my mom's Facebook. This one was louder than the first, not in words, but in implication. Black and white background, bold font. He's not mentally well. Please pray for my son. We're heartbroken, but doing our best. Some things are beyond our control. She didn't name me, but she didn't need to. Beneath the post, she commented with an old picture of me at age 12, smiling at a picnic braces, flashing the kind of photo you can only weaponize if you birthed it. The reaction was immediate. Calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Messages from cousins, aunts, even my grandmother again. This time the tone wasn't pity, it was fear. They asked if I was okay, if I was spiraling, if I'd been using drugs. One distant cousin even asked if I needed rehab.
I laughed at first. Actually laughed, sitting alone in my thrifted chair scrolling through accusations disguised as concern. But then came the message that wiped the smile from my face.
A woman named Cheryl, one of my mom's old co-workers, reached out privately. She said she'd always liked me and thought I deserved a warning. According to her, my mom had been crying at work, telling colleagues I was cutting myself off making threats, and that she feared for their safety. She even hinted she was considering filing for a restraining order against me. I froze. I hadn't called them. I hadn't visited, hadn't sent so much as a text. I had built silence around myself like armor. But here she was, trying to turn that silence into something dangerous. Planting seeds so that if she ever wanted to take legal action, there would already be whispers of justification. For a moment, I felt that old reflex, the one they had trained into me: rush and defend yourself, fix the narrative before it hardens. But I stopped. I didn't need to chase her lies this time. I needed to protect myself, not her reputation. So I did what she never expected. I documented. I pulled every voicemail, every email, every text that showed their words, their threats, their demands. I saved the message where my mom told me I wasn't their daughter anymore. I compiled timelines when I moved out, when I froze my credit, when the payday loan attempt happened. I created a folder labeled plainly Family Boundaries Evidence. If she wanted to play legal games, I was ready. Then I went to bed, and I slept.
The next day, Uncle Jeff's post began circulating in family chats. People who had once scolded me were suddenly apologizing, admitting they'd experienced manipulation too. One cousin confessed she'd once been pressured into co-signing a loan for my dad. Another admitted my mom guilt-tripped her into paying for a family gathering years ago. The stories trickled in, each one painting the same portrait: my parents had been doing this for years. I was just the first one to say no. For the first time, I wasn't alone. Life outside their chaos began to blossom in ways I hadn't expected. Work flourished without the constant drain of family drama. I had energy for creativity again. I picked up freelance clients and stacked money into a savings account no one else had access to. I bought a tiny dining table from a thrift shop and built it myself. Every screw went in crooked, but the table stood. I sat at it that night eating pasta I cooked for myself and realized that table meant more than anything I'd left behind in their apartment. I adopted a cat, Olive. A mischievous, loud, chaotic little creature who knocked things off counters at 4 a.m. and screamed at shadows. She followed me everywhere, like a tiny guardian, making sure I didn't fall back into old patterns. And for the first time, I realized freedom isn't glamorous. It's not expensive or flashy. It's sitting at a table you built yourself, listening to your cat yell at nothing, and realizing the silence you used to fear has become peace. Still, they tried. They reached through relatives, through vague posts, through lies. But with each attempt, their grip weakened. Because when you stop answering, when you stop playing your part in someone else's script, the play collapses. The last message I ever got from my dad was short, cruel, and hollow all at once. You've embarrassed this family enough. We're blocking you. No greeting, no name. Just a single line flung into my inbox like a stone. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for it to sting. It didn't. It just looked pathetic, like the final swing of someone who had already lost. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That silence was my reply. And then everything stopped. Days turned into weeks. For the first time in years, my phone didn't buzz with guilt. My inbox didn't flood with demands. I didn't brace myself every time my name lit up in a group chat. The tension drained away, replaced by something so simple, I almost didn't recognize it. Peace. Life was plain, even messy at times, but it was mine. The faucet in my new apartment still hissed like a snake every morning. The cabinet doors leaned crooked on their hinges. My couch sagged more than it should. But when I walked through the door, I didn't hear judgment. I heard nothing at all, and that nothing was everything. I started building a new rhythm. Saturday mornings at a local cafe where the barista always spelled my name wrong. Board game nights with neighbors whose last names I didn't know, but whose laughter filled my living room. Quiet evenings watching movies at 2 a.m. Because I could, because no one was knocking on my door asking why the lights were still on. Work flourished in the background. Without their chaos draining me, my focus sharpened. I took on more freelance projects, added money to savings, and for the first time felt like I was building a future that couldn't be stolen. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about them. I wondered if they sat together in that silent apartment, scrolling through old photos, spinning new lies to anyone who would listen. I wondered if they regretted anything, or if they had convinced themselves I was simply the villain in their story. Probably the latter, but that wasn't my concern anymore. The truth is, walking away didn't feel like losing family. It felt like finally putting down a burden I had carried for too long. They taught me that love was conditional, that belonging required payment, that silence was loyalty. And I believed them for years, until I didn't. I realized something important: family is forever. Yes, but not always in the way people mean it. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you're meant to keep. Sometimes forever is just the echo of their absence, reminding you that peace is possible on the other side. I thought cutting them off would feel like amputation. Instead, it felt like waking up from anesthesia and realizing the ache I carried wasn't even mine. It was theirs, forced onto me. I put it down, and I found my own hands could build. I built crooked tables. I built routines filled with coffee and laughter. I built a savings account with no leeches attached. I built a home where my cat could scream at shadows and knock things off counters just because she felt like it. And most importantly, I built myself whole, messy, unmonitored, unashamed. The night at Bayonne Keys, the smug dinner where they revealed their plan, doesn't haunt me anymore. It doesn't play in my head like a wound. It sits there, like a lesson sharp, and unmovable contribution isn't measured by what you hand over to people who take. Contribution is building a life that doesn't drain you dry. When people ask now if I regret it, if I miss them, I say no. Not because I hate them, but because I finally love myself enough to stop bleeding for people who call it generosity. So, if there's one thing I've learned, one thing I want anyone listening to carry with them, it's this: leaving isn't always loud. Sometimes leaving is simply choosing peace over performance. Sometimes it's a locked door and a quiet morning. Sometimes it's building a new family out of friends, neighbors, even a cat who yells at the walls.
And sometimes leaving is the only way to finally arrive.
If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories. And comment below. What moment taught you your peace was worth protecting?